The restaurant was dimly lit, the kind of place my wife loved to show off in. Sleek chandeliers, gold accents, and menus with prices that could make anyone's throat tighten. She was in her element, surrounded by her friends, sipping on wine, like it was liquid confidence. I sat beside her, quietly, almost invisible, until her laughter sliced through the air. She turned toward me with that sharp smile she wore when she wanted to wound, and in front of everyone she said, "You're a parody of a man. Look at you, chasing dreams that never paid off." The words dropped heavy on the table, and her friends leaned back, smirks spreading across their faces like a plague. A few chuckled, one even covered her mouth like she couldn't hold it in. Their laughter dug into my skin deeper than her words. I clenched my jaw and forced myself to keep still. I didn't lash out. I didn't throw a scene. I sat there with a half smile, pretending the joke rolled off my back, even though it burned a hole in my chest. Inside, something cracked. I'd always wondered what defined a man. Was it the size of his paycheck, or the persistence in his fight? Was it measured by his bank account, or by the loyalty he carried, the love he poured into another? My wife thought it was all about appearances, about flashing wealth and status. But me, I thought it was about standing steady even when the storm tried to break you. Still, in that moment, with her words hanging over me, I felt smaller than I ever had before. My name is Daniel, 36 years old. I work an ordinary job, nothing glamorous, just a cubicle in an office where the coffee is cheap and the windows don't open. I don't drive a luxury car, I don't wear designer suits, but every cent I earned, I gave to our life together. I believed in love built from loyalty, in building piece by piece instead of showing off an empire. She didn't see it that way. She wanted the empire, and since I couldn't give her one, she decided to tear me down instead. That dinner wasn't the first time she humiliated me. It was only the boldest. Years of small digs, eye rolls, whispers about how her friends' husbands were real men, who knew how to provide, had led to this moment. But this time, she didn't whisper. She wanted the world to hear. She wanted me to feel crushed under the weight of her disdain. And for the first time, I didn't just feel broken. I felt done. I pushed back my chair quietly, my sudden movement silencing their laughter for a second. I dropped some bills on the table, enough to cover my meal, and without a word, I walked out into the night air. The city was buzzing around me, neon lights flickering, strangers moving past without a care. I looked up at the sky, swallowed the lump in my throat, and whispered to myself, so soft only I could hear it, "Tomorrow I file." The next morning, the world looked the same, but inside me, something had shifted. I woke up early, earlier than usual, and the silence of the apartment pressed against my chest. She was still asleep in the bedroom, sprawled across the sheets like a queen in her palace, unaware her kingdom was about to fall. I dressed quietly, pulled on the same jacket I wore to work, but today wasn't about work. Today was about freedom. The lawyer's office was tucked between two coffee shops downtown, unimpressive on the outside, but to me, it felt like the doorway to another life. I stepped in, carrying nothing but the decision I'd made under the neon lights the night before. The lawyer was an older man with tired eyes that had seen too many broken marriages. He listened patiently as I explained, then slid the papers across the desk. The pen felt heavier than it should have, like it knew the weight of what I was about to do. My hand trembled for just a second before I steadied it, pressing my name into the page. Signature after signature, each stroke cutting the rope that tied me to her. For better or worse, I muttered under my breath, a bitter laugh escaping. Turns out worse meant me. The lawyer looked up from his notes and raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. When everything was signed, he leaned back and gave me the look of a man who'd seen too many like me. Tired, bruised, but still breathing. He warned me that it wouldn't be easy. She strikes me as the kind who won't let go quietly. Divorces like these, they get messy. She'll fight, she'll manipulate, she'll try to drag you back in. I nodded, but what I felt wasn't fear. It was calm, a strange serenity that settled into my bones. Like burning a bridge I never should have built, I said. more to myself than to him. For once, the flames didn't scare me. They felt like light. I walked out of that office into the cold morning air, the papers tucked inside my jacket. The city buzzed around me, cars honking, people rushing to work. But I felt like I was moving in slow motion, detached, untouchable. She didn't know yet. That was the best part. For once, I was ahead of her. On the sidewalk, I pulled out my phone and dialed the only person who'd understand. My mother answered on the second ring, her voice warm, steady, the opposite of everything I'd left behind. I told her simply, "It's done." There was a pause, then a sigh that carried years of hope and heartbreak. "Son," she said softly, "you were never the parody. She was the joke." Her words hit deeper than she could imagine. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small. I felt like a man taking back his story. That afternoon, I sat at my laptop, scrolling through flights. My finger hovered only a moment before clicking book. A one-way ticket, another city, another life. That night, I'd be gone. When I walked back into the apartment that evening, the smell of wine and perfume hit me before I even opened the door fully. Laughter spilled out of the living room, sharp and shrill, the same as the night before. She was at it again, hosting another dinner, basking in the glow of her little audience. I stood for a moment in the doorway, my coat still on, watching her hold court like nothing in the world could touch her, and maybe nothing ever had, until now. I stepped inside, quiet but deliberate. The chatter softened, heads turned, and there she was, my wife, draped in silk, glass of red in her hand, eyes glittering with arrogance. I didn't say a word at first. I just walked to the dining table, set my briefcase down, and pulled out the manila folder. The room froze as I placed it on the polished wood, the sound echoing louder than it should have. I looked at her, my voice steady, though my chest was thundering. "Since I'm a parody," I said, "I'll exit stage left." Her friends gasped, one actually dropping a fork onto her plate. My wife's painted smile faltered, but she recovered quickly, letting out a laugh too high-pitched, too forced. "You're bluffing," she said, tossing her hair like it was all a game. "You wouldn't survive without me." I met her eyes, a calm I didn't fully feel wrapping around my words. "Watch me." Inside, my hands were trembling, my stomach twisted, but I held my ground. For once, I wasn't the man she could kick down in front of others. For once, I had the power. I walked past her straight to the bedroom. The sound of whispers followed me down the hall, her friends murmuring, some pretending to sip their drinks just to mask their discomfort. I pulled out a single suitcase from the closet and opened it on the bed. Essentials only. A few shirts, jeans, shoes, laptop, passport. Everything else could rot with the life I was leaving behind. I stared at my wedding ring for a long moment, the gold band heavy with every memory, every fight, every sacrifice. It had once been a promise. Now it was just a shackle. I placed it on the kitchen counter as I passed through, not sparing her or her guests another glance. The elevator ride down felt like exhaling after holding my breath for years. By the time I stepped onto the street, my suitcase in hand, I felt lighter. Still shaking, still raw, but lighter. Hours later, in the sterile brightness of the airport, I sat by the gate, ticket in hand. The intercom crackled, and then it came. "Now boarding passengers for Flight 237. Service to..." The words washed over me like church bells. No, not church bells, freedom bells. I stood, lifted my suitcase, and walked toward the gate. For the first time in years, I wasn't dragging my feet. I was flying. The plane rumbled beneath me as it climbed into the clouds, and for the first time in years, I felt the faintest hint of air in my lungs. I pressed my head back against the seat, staring out of the small oval window. The sky stretched endless, a deep blue broken by streaks of white. The stewardess passed by with coffee, and I took a cup just to have something warm to hold. The bitterness hit my tongue, and I muttered under my breath, "Even the clouds look freer than me." My mind betrayed me with memories. Flashbacks played. like a cruel reel I couldn't turn off. I saw myself hunched over my desk at 2 in the morning, working overtime just to cover another one of her whims. I'd creep into bed hours later, exhausted, only for her to glance at me with disdain and say, "Is this all you'll ever be?" Then came her obsession with image. Dinners that cost half my paycheck, purses she said she needed to keep up with her friends, cars she swore we couldn't live without. Status was her oxygen, and I was just the machine that pumped it into her veins. I remember telling her once that money wasn't everything, that what mattered was us. She laughed in my face. Spoken like a man who has none. Nights blurred, together where I begged for partnership. I sat on the edge of the bed, asking her to meet me halfway, to fight for this marriage with me. Instead, she rolled her eyes, scrolling through her phone, mocking my pleas like they were the pathetic cries of a child. My heart had been a steady drum for her once, but she'd turned it into her punching bag. Now, strapped into seat 17A, I watched the ground vanish beneath the clouds. My hands shook slightly as I sipped the coffee again, but this time the tremble wasn't fear, it was release. A quiet, painful release. Tears welled in my eyes, not loud, not dramatic, but silent, hot and steady. I turned toward the window so no one would see. For the first time in years, I let myself cry. And when the tears were gone, when my chest had finally emptied, I exhaled a breath that felt like it had been stuck inside me for a decade. Around me, strangers chatted, flipped magazines, dozed off. Life moved on, unaffected. But for me, this was rebirth. I wasn't just leaving a city or a woman. I was leaving a cage I'd been convinced was home. I pressed my forehead to the cool glass, watching the horizon glow with streaks of fading sun. A thought settled in my chest, quiet but absolute. That night wasn't running away. It was running home to myself. The city felt foreign the moment I stepped off the plane. The air was heavier, the streets louder, and the faces rushing past me were all strangers. I found a small apartment within a week. Nothing more than a box with a bed, a cracked window, and thin walls that let me hear the lives of others bleeding through. But it was mine. Empty, quiet, no perfume lingering in the air, no sharp voice waiting to tear me apart. That silence was both a comfort and a curse. Loneliness hit me harder than I expected. Nights stretched on endlessly, and I caught myself, reaching for my phone, almost dialing her number just to hear the familiar venom. Financial stress piled on quickly, new rent, deposits, groceries, all with only a modest paycheck coming in. Doubt crept into my chest, whispering that maybe she'd been right all along, maybe I really was just a parody of a man. Still, I pushed forward. Each morning I dressed neatly and set out into the city, chasing jobs with a stack of resumes and a heart that beat louder than my confidence. I reconnected with old friends over coffee, their surprise at seeing me alone slowly fading into quiet support. One of them reminded me of something I'd buried long ago. My dream of writing. Once words had been my escape, my way of carving meaning into the world. I had abandoned it when she called it childish. Now I picked it up again, hands shaky over the keyboard, unsure if I still remembered how to breathe life into sentences. At the same time my phone rang constantly. Her name flashing across the screen became its own kind of alarm bell. The voicemails started smug, mocking me, telling me I'd come crawling back. Then they turned sharp, angry, threatening. I let them pile up, unanswered. Every time I deleted another message, I felt stronger. The first flicker of hope came quietly. A small magazine accepted an article I had written at 2 in the morning, words that had spilled out of me when loneliness became too heavy. The email was short, almost careless, but it came with a paycheck attached. I stared at that message for a long time, unable to stop the smile spreading across my face. It wasn't about the money. It was about proof. Proof that I wasn't worthless. Proof that I could stand without her shadow pressing down on me. That night, I came back to the apartment, paper bag of cheap takeout in hand, the glow of my laptop screen lighting up the corner where I worked. I sat down, ate alone, and for once, didn't feel empty. The silence pressed against me, but this time, it was kind. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the blank walls, and let the words fall out with a grin I hadn't worn in years. The first whispers reached me through mutual friends. Over a coffee meetup, one of them leaned across the table and smirked knowingly. "She's furious, you know. Telling everyone you're broke, useless, that it's only a matter of time before you crawl back to her." I stirred my drink slowly, letting the words hang in the air. Part of me wasn't surprised. That was her way. Control the story, protect the image, make me the villain while she played the martyr. But cracks were showing. The truth had a way of slipping through the seams. While she spun her tales, reality began to catch up with her. The expensive dinners weren't being hosted so often. The designer bags she flaunted stayed tucked away, and her circle of friends, the shallow ones who fed off appearances, started to drift. Debt has a smell to it, and once people catch a whiff, they scatter. I didn't even need to say a word. Life was doing the talking for me. Flashbacks came uninvited, sharp and bitter. I remembered standing in grocery store aisles counting coins, buying instant noodles while she waved shopping bags from luxury stores, her smile as wide as if she'd won a prize. I remembered skipping lunches so she could sip champagne at rooftop bars. I remembered her saying once, "You should be proud you can give me this lifestyle." I was proud then, foolishly proud. Now I saw it clearly for what it was, me breaking myself down to build her throne. "Funny," I whispered to myself one night, staring at the glow of my computer screen. She called me a parody, but I was the one funding the show. Her calls didn't stop. They became their own cruel evolution. At first, they were mocking. "You think writing will save you? Pathetic. You'll starve without me." Then they shifted, softer, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Maybe we can work this out. I miss you. Come home and we'll fix this." The sweetness rotted quickly into begging. "Please, just talk to me. I can't do this without you." And finally, when silence was all I gave her, came the threats. "You'll regret this. No one else will want you. I'll make sure of it." Each voicemail was a reminder of the woman I'd left behind. Each message confirmed that the silence I lived in now was worth more than any conversation with her. For a while, I listened just to remind myself I'd escaped, but then even that felt like poison. One night, as her number flashed across the screen again, vibrating on the table beside my dinner, I picked it up, stared at it, and pressed block. The screen went dark. My apartment hummed with quiet. For the first time in a long time, I felt the final thread snap. She no longer had access to my life. She no longer had access to me. The breakthrough came quietly, almost like it was afraid to announce itself. One morning, after weeks of sleepless nights, my inbox lit up with a message I had been waiting for. An editor from a respected publication wanted not just one of my articles, but a series. They called my writing sharp, honest, necessary. I sat there staring at the screen, my hands trembling, a laugh breaking from my chest before I could stop it. For the first time in years, I felt proud of myself. Not because someone else validated me, but because I had created something of worth on my own terms. Work rolled in after that, a steady rhythm of assignments, payments, recognition. Soon I wasn't just scraping by, I was living. My name began to carry weight in rooms I'd never even dreamed of entering. There was talk of a promotion, and eventually it came. A title, a raise, respect, the kind of things she once claimed I'd never have. Every success felt like a stone laid into the foundation of the life I was building, a life without her. With new opportunities came new people. Genuine souls who weren't chasing status but chasing meaning, chasing growth. Over dinners and coffees, I realized how different they were from the shallow circle I had once been paraded around in. These people listened, laughed freely, asked questions not out of politeness, but because they truly cared. I found myself breathing easier in their presence, like I was finally seen, not judged. And then one evening she appeared. I had just finished a meeting, walking down the busy streets of the city I now called home. when I heard my name cut through the crowd. I turned, and there she was, dressed impeccably as always, but there was a crack in her perfection. Her eyes were sharp, desperate beneath the polished surface. "You really thought you could run from me?" she sneered, stepping closer. "No one else will want you. You belong with me." For a moment, the old weight pressed against my chest. The years of humiliation, of bending, of swallowing my pride just to keep her happy. But then it lifted, replaced by something lighter, stronger. I let out a soft laugh, shaking my head. "No," I said gently, almost like I was speaking to a child who didn't understand. "I belong with peace." Her face twisted, her mask slipping as anger clawed its way through. She raised her voice, drawing stares from strangers, trying to pull me back into the chaos she thrived on. But I didn't stop. I turned, hands steady, steps firm, and walked away. Behind me, her voice rose, shrill and furious, echoing down the street. Yet the sound didn't touch me anymore. By the time I turned the corner, she was just another noise in the city. Powerless, forgotten, and I was free. Months passed, and the city that once felt foreign now felt like mine. The streets no longer loomed over me, they carried me. My name had found its place in print, my work respected, my voice finally heard. The small apartment that had once echoed with loneliness now hummed with purpose. The fridge was stocked, the bills paid on time, and my desk was cluttered not with debt notices, but with drafts and projects. For the first time in my adult life, I was thriving, on my own terms. One evening, as I sifted through emails, I saw her name. It froze me for a moment, like a ghost had slipped through the cracks. The subject line was desperate, plain, "Please read." Against my better judgment, I opened it. The words tumbled across the screen, heavy with panic. She spoke of debts piling higher than she could manage, of friends who had quietly disappeared, of nights spent alone in an apartment she could no longer afford. Her tone shifted from pleading to pitiful, the same pattern I knew so well. Only this time, it was stripped of arrogance. It was a confession of collapse. She wanted me back, not out of love, but out of survival. I sat back in my chair, staring at the glow of her words. There was a time when her voice defined me, when her approval or disdain determined how I breathed. Now all I felt was stillness, no rage, no pity, just clarity. Without a second thought, I hovered over the message, pressed delete, and watched it vanish into nothing. Her voice once defined me. I whispered to the quiet room. Now, her silence does. The weeks that followed moved gently, like the world had softened. My mornings began with coffee brewed slowly, steam curling into the air as sunlight spilled across the floor. I no longer woke to the sting of her laughter or the dread of her scorn. Instead, I woke to peace, to possibility, to a life that was finally my own. One morning, I carried my mug to the window and sat, letting the warmth of the cup seep into my hands. The city stretched out before me, the skyline glowing in the golden hush of sunrise. I thought about everything, the dinners where she mocked me, the nights where I begged for love, the insults that nearly broke me. And then I thought about the journey here, the papers signed, the flight that carried me away, the rebuilding, the laughter of new friends, the quiet I had grown to love. She had called me a parody of a man, a joke in her eyes. But as the sun lifted higher, painting the sky in shades of fire, I understood the truth. She called me a parody of a man, but she was the punchline, and I was finally complete.